Welcome to this video. My name is Cameron Hall, and today we are going back through the years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, looking at how it all started, what's happened so far, and what is to come for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, taking a step back and looking at each Marvel film so far, every single one has actually contributed to advancing the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whether that be introducing new characters, introducing a new world, introducing a new power set. Either way, every single one is pushing us closer to that final Avengers film that's going to take place with the villain Thanos. Thanos, who in the comics is actually responsible for killing all of the Avengers. Thanos has been teased as a major upcoming villain ever since the very first Avengers movie back in 2012, and as a comic book fan is one of the most anticipated characters to ever join the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So where did all of this begin? Well, comic books actually became extremely popular back in 1939 when Action Comics, now known as DC Comics, released the debut issue of their superhero Superman. This was also the year that Marvel was actually known as Timely Comics, introducing their very first superheroes, the original Human Torch, and their other hero Namor the Submariner. Now, I say the original Human Torch due to this particular introduction not actually being the Human Torch character that we know of today. The Human Torch in this story was an android disguised in human form running from his creator. As for Namor the Submariner, he was an Atlantean who was also half human with the ability to fly, breathe underwater, and also had the ability of superhuman strength. Later, towards the end of 1940, a teenage assistant was actually hired to work alongside editor-in-chief Joe Simon and artist Jack Kirby. His name was Stanley Lieber, and he would later become the world famous Stan Lee, who would go on in the many years to come to create many famous comic book characters such as Iron Man, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, and many more. In 1941, Marvel introduced one of the biggest characters in the history of Marvel, Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, of course, the 1940s being when America was still coming out of the Great Depression and Europe being engulfed in World War II, it wasn't until America entered World War II when Captain America comic books became incredibly popular, selling nearly 1 million copies per issue. Now, of course, this was due to the fact that Captain America was actually going up against Nazis, and his prime nemesis being one of the Nazis and Hydra, the Red Skull. In the 3 years ranging from the very beginning of 1939 to the end of 1941, Marvel, or should I say Timely Comics, introduced their first three main superheroes: Namor the Submariner, Captain America, and of course the Human Torch. However, once World War II surpassed in 1945, superhero comics tend to have fallen out of fashion and popularities had changed, and this didn't actually pick back up for another decade until we hit the 1960s. So throughout the rest of the 1940s and throughout the 1950s, Marvel, also known as Timely Comics, had lost a sense of direction when creating their comic books. It actually depended on what was popular at the time, whether that be a romance comic, an action comic, or a history comic, and this was due to the fact that most of the sales that contributed to the Captain America comic books were from people fighting in World War II. Now, of course, when World War II ended, these people went home with their families, they went home and started careers, and didn't really pick up comic books ever again. Marvel ran with the name Timely Comics until renaming to Atlas Comics in 1951. This name held up throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s until 1961 came around and becoming, as what we know today, Marvel Comics. The first few years of the 1960s saw the creation of many famous comic book characters ranging from the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man, Thor, Doctor Strange, the team of the Avengers being assembled, and of course the most famous characters of all, Iron Man and Spider-Man. Many of these characters are still taking the spotlight in modern comic books today, and more importantly, dominating the box office with their superhero films. So the team of the Avengers is made up of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. Iron Man, created in 1963 by Stan Lee, is, as described by himself, a genius billionaire playboy philanthropist. Complete with his huge ego, rich boy antiques, Tony Stark inherited his father's company, Stark Industries, a weapons contractor responsible for creating military weapons. Tony Stark was later captured and held hostage by terrorists using the very weapons he created. During his capture, Stark was struck by a landmine and was subjected to a piece of shrapnel making its way into his heart. Inevitably, this led to Stark creating the famous chess piece known as the miniature arc reactor, which would be later used to power his Iron Man suits. Captain America, also known as Steve Rogers, created in 1941, is known to be more or less the leader of the Avengers. He's a Boy Scout, follows the rules and doesn't hold judgment on anything until the full situation is made clear. Captain America is the first ever super soldier. He acquired his powers through the super soldier serum as part of an experiment. Moments later, however, the creator of the super soldier serum was murdered by Hydra in an attempt to not only steal the secret formula, but to also prevent an army of super soldiers from being created. Captain America faced off against Hydra and their leader Johann Schmidt, famously known as the Red Skull. As for Thor, he was created in the early 1950s/1960s, and he's unlike the other heroes. He's an actual god, known as the God of Thunder. He's the son of Odin, born on Asgard and brought up by his mother and father alongside his adopted brother Loki. Thor possesses the enchanted hammer known as Mjolnir or Mjolnir. Nobody really knows how to pronounce that, so bear with me on that one. But in which only the worthiest of characters can pick up this hammer. This gives Thor the ability to fly, control the weather, super strength, and more. The Incredible Hulk, on the other hand, also known as Bruce Banner, created in 1962, is known within the Marvel Universe as one of the most powerful and scariest characters due to his uncontrollability. Bruce Banner was caught in the blast of a gamma radiation bomb he invented for the US Defense Department. During testing, a careless teenager found himself on the testing site as the bomb was about to be detonated. Bruce Banner raced in to protect the teenager and in doing so was caught by the blast, ultimately being irradiated by the gamma radiation and unleashing the Hulk. Now, this is one of my favourite origin stories for a comic book character, mainly because the comics and the films are always toying with the idea as to whether the gamma radiation actually created the Hulk, or if the Hulk was always inside Bruce Banner and the gamma radiation just released it. Now, moving on over to the characters such as Hawkeye and Black Widow. Hawkeye was created in 1964 and was actually a villain when he was first introduced. It wasn't until 1965 when he later joined the Avengers and has been part of that team ever since. Now, the same actually goes for Black Widow as well. She was first introduced as a villain and later joined the Avengers. However, in the Avengers films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, these characters were already introduced as heroes in the Iron Man and Thor films, unlike the comics. After the 1960s and for the next 30 years, Marvel would go through plenty of success and different methods of storytelling, as well as many changes in terms of Jack Kirby leaving Marvel for DC Comics in 1970, as well as Stan Lee halting his own writing of comic books almost completely. The peak of Marvel was reached in 1991 when comic book fans wouldn't even read the Marvel comics they were buying. Instead, they would preserve the comics they were buying for future investment, and also reached the point where the story, which was the root of comic book storytelling, was put on the back burner due to comic book fans eventually being more interested in the art and action happening in the pages of the comics. However, further into the 90s, Marvel began to run out of stories to tell within their comic books. It especially started to show when current stories of the 90s began to get a little bit longer and some of their endeavours became a little bit more crazy and ridiculous. This was a true sign that Marvel once again was losing their way and eventually had to file for bankruptcy protection and sell off some of their most famous characters to film studios. For example, the character rights for Spider-Man was sold to Sony Pictures, and the X-Men, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Deadpool and Daredevil were sold to 20th Century Fox. Now, you have to remember that back then, Marvel was strictly a comic book company. They hadn't yet left their footprint on the film industry. It was only after the release of Fox's first X-Men film and Sony's first Spider-Man film that Marvel realised just how popular superhero films could be. After this, Marvel established their own Marvel Studios, and of course the rest is history. Now that is it. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Cameron Hall, and in the next video I'll be jumping into how Marvel set out phases in order to build their very own Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thank you and see you in the next video.